The Vaulderie had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies and 6 arms that could crush metal. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, and their voices sounded like thunder. Every species that met them learned to fear them. Every world they visited became their property. It was simply how things worked in the universe. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator. Around him, 46 other warships floated in perfect formation. Each ship was bigger than a mountain. Each one carried enough weapons to burn a planet to ash. Zorath had led this fleet to 17 different worlds. 17 times, he had demanded surrender. 17 times, the primitive species had bowed before him. Today would be the 18th dot. The small blue planet filled his viewing screen. The scientists had detected radio signals coming from this world for several decades. The signals were simple and crude, showing that the species living there had only recently discovered basic technology. They called themselves humans. They called their world Earth. Zorath found the names amusing. Such simple creatures playing with their simple toys, thinking they mattered in the grand design of the universe. They would learn differently soon enough. "Open communications," Zorath commanded. His voice echoed through the bridge. "Send the standard message." The message was simple. It had worked on every other species. Surrender immediately. Accept Vaulderie rule. Provide workers and resources. Resistance would result in complete destruction. No exceptions. No negotiations. Zorath waited. The primitive species usually responded within minutes. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they begged. Sometimes they asked questions that made no difference. But they always surrendered. What choice did they have? Far below, on the planet called Earth, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Perry stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon. The ship was humanity's pride, the largest vessel they had ever built. It could travel between planets in days instead of months. It carried weapons that could destroy asteroids. The crew had trained for years to operate it, and it was nothing compared to the alien fleet now surrounding their world. Daniel was 34 years old, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. He had joined the space program because he dreamed of exploring the stars. He had imagined meeting other life forms, learning from them, building friendships across the galaxy. He had never imagined this. "The message is coming through," said Lisa Moore, the communications officer. She was 28, with dark skin and quick hands that danced across her controls. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could see the fear in her eyes. "They want us to surrender. They say they will destroy us if we refuse." The bridge fell silent. Everyone looked at Captain Amy Sullivan. She was 42 years old, a veteran of 3 deep space missions, known for staying calm when everything went wrong. Her red hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her green eyes were fixed on the viewing screen where the alien ships hung like dark clouds. For a long moment, she said nothing. The weight of the entire world pressed down on her shoulders. Billions of lives depended on her next words. Her crew watched her, waiting, hoping she would have an answer. Then Amy Sullivan did something unexpected. She laughed. It started small, just a chuckle deep in her throat. Then it grew louder, fuller, until she was laughing like she had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. Her crew stared at her in shock. Lisa Moore wondered if their captain had lost her mind. "Captain?" Daniel asked carefully. "Are you all right?" Amy wiped tears from her eyes and took a deep breath. "I am fine, Daniel. Better than fine, actually." She gestured at the viewing screen. "Look at them. 47 ships hanging there like they own the place. They sent us a message demanding surrender. Do you know what that means?" "It means we are in trouble?" suggested Kevin Brooks, the young navigator. He was only 25, fresh from the academy, and his hands were shaking on his controls. No, Amy said. It means they expect us to give up. It means they've done this before and won every time. It means they have no idea what they are dealing with. She walked to the center of the bridge, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Her crew watched her, and slowly, very slowly, the fear in their eyes began to change into something else. Humanity has been fighting since the beginning of time, Amy said. We fought animals. We fought nature. We fought each other. We built weapons and defenses and strategies because we had to, because survival demanded it. We turned war into a science. We studied it, improved it, passed it down through generations. She pointed at the alien fleet. These Voldari have conquered 17 species. They are used to easy victories. They are used to enemies who surrender at the first sign of danger. They have never faced a species that refuses to give up. But Captain, Lisa said, their ships are enormous. Their weapons could destroy cities. How can we possibly fight them? Amy smiled. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. We do not fight them directly. Not yet. We are humans, Lisa. We are sneaky. We are clever. We find weaknesses and exploit them. We adapt and overcome. That is what we have always done. She turned to Daniel. Open a channel to Earth Command. Tell them we need time. Then open a channel to the Voldari. Tell them we need to consult with our leaders before we can respond to their generous offer. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You think they will agree? They have never been refused before. They will think we are scared and stalling. They will find it amusing. And while they are laughing at us, we will be preparing. Daniel nodded and began transmitting. Kevin adjusted their position to avoid looking threatening. Lisa recorded everything, knowing that whatever happened next would be history. The response from High Commander Zorth came quickly. As Amy had predicted, he was amused by the delay request. What harm could 3 days cause? The humans were clearly primitive and frightened. He granted them 72 hours to accept the inevitable. On the horizon, Amy Sullivan watched the alien fleet settle into a waiting pattern. They were confident. They were relaxed. They thought the hard part was over. They were very, very wrong. 3 days, Amy said quietly. That is all we need. To do what? Kevin asked. Amy turned to face her crew. The fear was gone from their eyes now. In its place was something harder, something older, something that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended. Them, to remind the universe why you do not pick fights with humans. The first day of Earth's resistance had begun. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, there was a place that most people did not know existed. It was built during a time when humans feared destroying themselves with their own weapons. Thick walls of concrete and steel protected it from bombs and missiles. Underground rivers provided water. Stored food could feed thousands for years. The people who built it hoped it would never be used. Now, it had a new purpose. General Christopher Lane stood at the head of a long table in the main conference room. He was 60 years old with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He had spent 40 years in the military, fighting in wars on 3 continents. He had seen the worst that humans could do to each other. He had thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. 47 ships, he said, pointing at the holographic display floating above the table. The alien fleet looked even more terrifying in the blue light. Each one approximately 8 kilometers long. Weapons capable of destroying cities in seconds. Shields that can block anything we throw at them. Around the table sat the most important people on Earth. Presidents and generals. Scientists and engineers. The best minds humanity had to offer. Gathered together to face the greatest threat their species had ever known. What are our options? asked Dr. Patricia Wong. She was 55 years old, the world's leading expert on alien biology. Her job had been mostly theoretical until 3 days ago. Now she studied actual alien communications and tried to understand what they were dealing with. Our options are limited, General Lane admitted. Direct military confrontation would be suicide. Our entire nuclear arsenal might damage 1 or 2 of their ships. That leaves 45 more to burn our world. Then we surrender, said a man at the far end of the table. He was a politician, his face pale with fear. We have no choice. At least if we surrender, we survive. Do we? Asked Colonel Nathan Gray. He was 48 years old, the most decorated tactical officer in military history. His dark eyes were fixed on the holographic display, studying the alien formation like a chess player examining the board. The message said they want workers and resources. That sounds like slavery to me. Is that surviving? The politician had no answer. Dr. Samuel Harris leaned forward. He was the chief physicist at the Global Research Center, a thin man with messy white hair and thick glasses. I have been studying the data from their transmission. Their technology is advanced, but it is not magic. It follows rules. It has limits. What kind of limits? General Lane asked. Their shields, for example. They block energy weapons and projectiles, but they appear to let smaller objects through, probably to allow light and radiation for sensors. If we could get something small enough past the shields. Like what? Patricia asked. I do not know yet. I need more data. More information about how their ships work. Nathan Gray was still staring at the holographic display. His fingers tapped the table slowly, a habit he had when he was thinking hard. Look at their formation, he said quietly. See how they are arranged? Everyone looked. The alien ships were positioned in a wide circle around Earth, evenly spaced, facing inward. What about it? General Lane asked. It is a display formation. Intimidation. They want to look powerful and overwhelming. Nathan stood up and walked to the display, pointing at specific gaps between ships. But it is not a combat formation. There are blind spots here, here, and here. Sections where their sensors do not overlap. Areas where something could slip through undetected. How do you know they are blind spots? Because any military strategist would see them. Any species that had fought real wars would know better than to leave those gaps. Nathan turned to face the room. These Valdari have conquered 17 species, but they have never actually fought a war. Not a real one. They show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and move on. They have never faced an enemy that fought back. The room was silent as the meaning of his words sank in. They do not know how to fight, Patricia said slowly. They have never had to learn. Exactly. But we have. Nathan walked back to his seat. Humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting. We have developed strategies and tactics and entire philosophies of war. We have learned how to defeat enemies who are bigger and stronger. We have learned how to win when winning seems impossible. General Lane looked around the table. The fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Hope, determination, the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. What do you need? He asked Nathan. Information. We need to know exactly how their ships work. Their weapons, their shields, their engines, their command structure. Everything. How do we get that information? We cannot exactly walk onto their ships and look around. A woman at the end of the table spoke up. She had been silent until now, watching and listening. Her name was Rachel Green, and she was the most skilled diplomat on Earth. She was 40 years old with calm brown eyes and a voice that could convince anyone of anything. Actually, Rachel said, that is exactly what we can do. Everyone turned to look at her. They expect us to surrender. They expect negotiations and discussions. What if we give them what they expect? Rachel smiled. I will go to them. I will ask questions. I will pretend to be scared and desperate. And while I am there, I will gather all the information we need. That is incredibly dangerous, General Lane said. If they suspect what you are doing, they will not suspect. They think we are primitive and helpless. They will see exactly what they expect to see, a frightened diplomat begging for mercy. Rachel stood up. Give me a team. Give me the right equipment. I will get inside their flagship and learn everything there is to know. Nathan Gray looked at her with new respect. You are brave. I am human, Rachel replied. We do what we must. General Lane made his decision. You have your team. You leave in 6 hours. As the meeting ended and people hurried to their tasks, Nathan Gray stayed behind. He stared at the holographic display, his mind racing through possibilities. The Valdari were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They had been winning for so long that they had forgotten how to be careful. That arrogance would be their downfall. He began sketching battle plans on his tablet. Unconventional tactics. Guerrilla strategies. Ways to turn their own strength against them. Ways to turn their own strength against them. The ideas flowed faster than he could write them down. For the first time since the alien fleet arrived, Nathan Gray felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt excited. This was going to be the greatest challenge of his life. The enemy was stronger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever faced. The odds were impossible. Any sane person would have despaired. But Nathan Gray was not interested in despair. He was interested in victory. And somewhere in those battle plans, hidden among the strategies and tactics and careful calculations, victory was waiting to be found. He just had to be clever enough to see it. The deadline arrived with the cold silence of space. High Commander Zorath sat on his throne, waiting for the humans to send their surrender message. His advisors stood nearby, already planning the occupation. They discussed which cities to harvest first, which humans would make the best workers, how quickly they could strip the planet of its resources. None of them expected what happened next. The first missile came from nowhere. A small ship, hidden in the asteroid belt for 2 days, launched a single warhead at the Valdari flagship. The weapon had been modified with the frequency data from Rachel's mission. It should not have been able to penetrate the shields. It did. The explosion tore through the flagship's outer hull. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. For the first time in 1,000 years, a Valdari command ship had been damaged in battle. What is happening? Zorath roared, rising from his throne. His guards rushed to protect him, but there was nothing to protect him from. The attack had come from outside, from enemies he had dismissed as primitive and harmless. Unknown weapon signature, his tactical officer reported. They have somehow matched our shield frequency. Impossible. But it was not impossible. It was happening. Across the Valdari fleet, chaos erupted. Human vessels appeared from the blind spots Nathan Gray had identified. They were small and fast, converted cargo ships and mining vessels armed with modified weapons. They should have been easy targets for the mighty Valdari warships. They were not. Captain Amy Sullivan led the attack from the bridge of the horizon. Her ship dove through a gap in the alien formation, firing at exposed reactor vents that Rachel's team had mapped. 2 Valdari ships lost power within minutes, their crews scrambling to restore systems that had never failed before. Target the communication arrays, Amy ordered. Blind them. Kevin Brooks, the young navigator who had been terrified just 3 days ago, pushed the horizon through maneuvers that should have been impossible. His hands were steady now. His fear had been transformed into focus. The battle spread across the solar system. Human ships struck and retreated, using hit-and-run tactics that the Valdari had never encountered. The aliens were used to enemies who stood and fought, who tried to match their power with power. They had no experience fighting an enemy who refused to play by their rules. Lisa Moore broadcast on all frequencies, sending humanity's defiance to every corner of space. This is the human race. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We will fight until the last breath leaves our bodies. To anyone listening, know this. Earth is not an easy conquest. The message was received on 17 conquered worlds. Species who had surrendered without hope heard the impossible news. Someone was fighting back. Someone was hurting the Valdari. On the flagship, Zora struggled to regain control. His fleet was designed for intimidation, not combat. His officers were administrators, not warriors. They gave orders that made no sense, moved ships into formations that created more vulnerabilities. Human vessels approaching Sector 7. A tactical officer reported. Destroy them. We cannot get a targeting lock. They are too fast. They keep disappearing into our sensor blind spots. Zorath slammed his claw against his throne. How did these primitives know about the blind spots? How had they discovered the shield frequencies? Nothing made sense anymore. A new report came in, and it was worse than anything before. Human ships were not just attacking. They were ramming. Pilots were crashing their vessels directly into Valdari engines and weapon systems. They were using their own ships as weapons. They are killing themselves, an advisor said, confused. They are dying on purpose. They are insane, another added, but Zorath understood. He had studied the human broadcasts, their history, their culture. He knew about their wars, their martyrs, their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. He had dismissed it as primitive foolishness. Now he saw it for what it truly was. In the Horizon's engineering section, a young engineer named Carlos Mendez worked frantically to keep the ship running. Enemy fire had damaged the power grid. Systems were failing. But Carlos refused to give up. He rewired connections with his bare hands, ignoring the sparks that burned his skin. I need 5 more minutes, he called to the bridge. You have 3, Amy replied. Make it work. He made it work. On another human ship, a converted freighter called the Defiant Star, Captain Lara Chun led her crew in a suicide run against a Valdari weapons platform. The platform was protecting the flagship, preventing other human ships from getting close. All hands, prepare for impact, Lavra announced. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. It has been an honor serving with you. The Defiant Star struck the weapons platform at full speed. Both exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. 23 humans died in that moment. Their sacrifice opened a path to the flagship. Kevin Brooks saw the opening and pushed the Horizon through. The ship shuddered as alien weapons fire grazed its hull. Warning alarms screamed. Smoke filled the corridors. We have 1 shot, Amy said. Make it count. Daniel Perry aimed the main weapons at the flagship's exposed reactor. His hands were steady. His aim was true. He thought about everyone who had died to give them this chance. He fired. The missile struck the flagship's reactor with perfect precision. The explosion ripped through the ship's core. Power systems failed. Shields collapsed. High Commander Zorath watched in disbelief as his throne room filled with fire. Across the fleet, Valdari ships lost coordination. Without the flagship's command signals, they did not know what to do. Some tried to retreat. Others fired wildly, hitting nothing. A few continued the attack, but without leadership. Their efforts were unorganized and ineffective. When the battle ended, 17 Valdari ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were scattered and confused. Earth had lost 23 vessels and over 2,000 brave men and women. But Earth was still free. Amy Sullivan looked at the wreckage floating in space. She thought about Captain Lara Chun and the crew of the Defiant Star. She thought about every pilot who had given their life to protect their world. "We won," Kevin said quietly. He sounded surprised, like he still could not believe it. "We survived," Amy corrected. "Winning comes later." She knew this was not the end. The Voldari hegemony would not accept this defeat. They would send more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. The war was just beginning. But today, humanity had proven something important. They had shown the universe that courage and cleverness could overcome power and technology. They had demonstrated that some species do not surrender. No matter the odds, Lisa Moore transmitted one final message as the remaining Voldari ships retreated. "To the Voldari hegemony, you came to conquer us. You failed. Come back again, and we will defeat you again." Earth remembers its heroes. Earth does not forget. The message traveled across the galaxy, reaching ears that had never heard such defiance before. The universe would never be the same. 3 months passed after the first battle. Earth changed in ways no one could have predicted. Old enemies became allies. Countries that had fought each other for centuries now worked together. Factories that had built cars and planes now built warships. Schools taught children about the heroes who had given their lives for humanity's survival. And in secret, scientists worked day and night on captured Voldari technology. Admiral Daniel Perry stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Resilience. The ship was 3 times larger than the Horizon, built with human engineering and alien technology combined. Around it floated a fleet of 200 vessels, each one more powerful than anything humanity had possessed before the invasion. "They are coming," Lisa Moore reported. She had been promoted to lead communications officer for the entire fleet. 230 ships. "They will arrive in 6 hours." Daniel nodded. They had expected this. The Voldari hegemony could not allow their defeat to stand. They had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. If one species could resist them, others might try. They had to crush humanity completely. "All ships, prepare for battle," Daniel announced. His voice was broadcast to every vessel in the fleet. "This is what we have been training for. This is what we built these ships for. Today, we show the Voldari that their first defeat was not a mistake." In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, General Christopher Lane watched the approaching fleet on a massive screen. Beside him stood Colonel Nathan Gray, whose battle plans had saved humanity 3 months ago. "Can we win?" Christopher asked. Nathan studied the enemy formation. It was different this time. Tighter, more organized. The Voldari had learned from their mistakes. "They have adapted," Nathan said. "No more blind spots. No more exposed reactors. They are ready for our old tricks. So what do we do?" Nathan smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when he first realized the Voldari did not know how to fight. "We use new tricks." The battle began as the sun rose over Earth. Voldari ships descended like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons charging, their shields at full power. They expected resistance. They expected tricks. They thought they were prepared. They were wrong. The first surprise was the mines. Thousands of them, hidden in orbital paths the enemy ships would use. When the Voldari fleet passed through, explosions rippled across their formation. Shields absorbed most of the damage, but chaos spread through their ranks. The second surprise was the planetary defense grid. While building new ships, humanity had also built weapons on Earth itself. Massive cannons hidden in mountains. Satellite networks that could fire concentrated beams of energy. The planet itself had become a weapon. The third surprise was the counterattack. Admiral Perry led the human fleet directly into the enemy formation. This was not hit and run tactics. This was direct combat, ship against ship, weapon against weapon. The Valdari had expected humans to hide and ambush. They had not expected them to fight face to face. "All ships, choose your targets," Daniel ordered. "Show them what we have learned." The battle was brutal. Ships exploded on both sides. Human vessels took terrible damage, their hulls torn open, their crews struggling to survive. But they did not retreat. They did not break. They fought with a fury that shocked the Valdari commanders. Captain Amy Sullivan commanded a squadron of fast attack ships. She led them through the enemy fleet like a knife through water, targeting command ships and communication nodes. Wherever she went, Valdari organization fell apart. How do they keep fighting? A Valdari officer demanded on an intercepted transmission. "We have destroyed so many of their ships. Why do they not surrender?" The answer came from Dr. Patricia Wong, who was monitoring the battle from the command center. "Because surrender is not in our nature. It never has been." I Commander Zorath had survived the first battle, though badly wounded. He commanded the second fleet from a new flagship, determined to avenge his defeat. He watched the human vessels attacking with relentless energy, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. "They should be running," he said to no one in particular. "They should be begging for mercy." But the humans were not running. They were not begging. They were fighting harder than any species Zorath had ever encountered. Even as their ships burned and their crews died, they kept coming. The turning point came when Nathan Gray executed his final strategy. He had positioned a hidden reserve fleet behind Earth's moon. At the critical moment, when the Valdari thought they were winning, this fleet emerged and struck the enemy from behind. The Valdari formation shattered. Ships that had been pressing their attack suddenly found themselves surrounded. Communication broke down. Commanders gave conflicting orders. The organized invasion became a desperate struggle for survival. "All ships, press the attack," Daniel ordered. "Do not let them regroup." The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 63 Valdari ships had been destroyed. Another 47 were damaged beyond repair. The rest retreated, scattering in all directions. Their dreams of conquest burning in the darkness of Space.Earth had lost 2 ships. 2 ships out of 200 in the command center. General Lane stared at the final numbers in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Nathan Gray leaned back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. "We learned from our first battle. We improved our ships, our weapons, our tactics. We spent 3 months preparing for exactly this moment. And the Valdari? They spent 3 months building more ships and training more soldiers. They thought the problem was quantity. They did not understand that the problem was quality." Nathan smiled. "They still do not know how to fight. They just know how to attack." Among the captured prisoners was High Commander Zorath himself. His flagship had been disabled and boarded by human marines. He was brought before the Earth Defense Council, wounded and defeated. General Lane looked at the fallen commander. "You conquered 17 species. You ruled for 1,000 years. How does it feel to lose?" Zorath's translator struggled with the question. Valdari did not have a word for losing. They had never needed one. "How did you do this?" Zorath asked. "We were more powerful. We had more ships. We had better technology." "You had all of those things," Lane agreed. "But you did not have what we have. What is that?" Lane thought about the pilots who had given their lives in the first battle. He thought about Captain Lara Chun and the Defiant Star. He thought about every scientist, engineer, soldier, and civilian who had worked to save their world. "Practice," he said finally. "We have been fighting since the beginning of our history. We have lost wars and won wars and learned from every single one. You spent 1,000 years conquering. We spent 10,000 years surviving." Zorath was silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question that would be remembered for generations. What happens now? General Lane looked at his colleagues. Nathan Gray, Patricia Wong, Rachel Green, who had risked her life on the alien flagship, Daniel Perry, whose fleet had just crushed the invasion. All of them had the same thought. Now, Lane said, we come for you. 1 year later, Admiral Daniel Perry stood on the bridge of the Resilience as it orbited the Voldari homeworld. Around him, a fleet of 500 human ships maintained position. On the planet below, the Voldari hegemony was negotiating its surrender, not conquest. Surrender, humanity, had not stopped with defending Earth. They had freed the 17 species the Voldari had enslaved. They had taught those species how to fight, how to resist, how to never give up. Together, they had built an alliance that stretched across the galaxy. Ambassador Rachel Green was down on the planet, finalizing the peace treaty. The terms were simple. The Voldari would release all their slaves. They would disarm their war fleet. They would join the new galactic community as equals, not rulers. Nathan Gray stood beside Daniel, watching the negotiations on a display screen. They really had no idea what they were getting into. No, Daniel agreed. They thought we would be easy, and now they know better. A young officer approached, carrying a message from the surface. Sir, the Voldari representatives have asked a question. They want to know what to call this period in their history. The time when their empire fell and something new began. Daniel thought about it. He thought about the fear he had felt when the alien fleet first arrived. The courage of everyone who had fought and died. The impossible victory that had changed everything. Tell them to call it what it is, he said. The human age. Nathan laughed. That is a classic one. Daniel smiled. It was a good name. A true name. Humanity had earned it with blood and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The universe would remember this story for 1,000 years. They would teach it in schools and tell it to children. They would speak of the small blue planet that refused to surrender. The primitive species that defeated an empire. The impossible victory that changed everything. And when people asked how it happened, the answer was always the same. Humans do not give up. They never have. And they never will. That is a classic one. The end. The shuttle was small and white, designed to look harmless. Rachel Green sat in the passenger compartment with 3 other people. They wore simple clothes and carried no visible weapons. They looked exactly like what they were supposed to be, a frightened diplomatic team, going to beg for mercy. What the Voldari would not see were the tiny devices hidden in their clothing. Sensors smaller than grains of rice. Transmitters thinner than human hair. Cameras disguised as buttons. Every piece of equipment had been designed to be invisible to alien technology. Remember, Rachel said to her team as the shuttle approached the massive alien flagship, we are scared. We are desperate. We do not understand what is happening. Ask stupid questions. Make them explain everything. The more they talk, the more we learn. Her team nodded. They were all volunteers, all willing to risk their lives for this mission. Each one knew they might not come back. The shuttle entered a huge docking bay. The ceiling was so high that clouds could have formed inside. Alien soldiers stood in rows, their red eyes glowing in the dim light. They were taller than humans, their bodies covered in dark shells that looked like armor. Each one had 6 arms ending in claws that could tear through steel. Rachel felt real fear as she stepped off the shuttle. It was not hard to pretend to be terrified. These creatures were nightmares made real. A Voldari officer approached them. He was larger than the others, with golden marks on his shell that showed his rank. His voice came through a translation device, cold and mechanical. You are the human delegation. The High Commander will see you now. Follow. They walked through endless corridors. Rachel let her eyes wander, her hidden cameras recording everything. She noticed how the walls were constructed, where the power conduits ran, how the doors opened and closed. Every detail was transmitted back to Earth. The High Commander's chamber was vast. Zorath sat on a raised platform, surrounded by guards and advisors. His shell was darker than the others, almost black, and his eyes burned with ancient intelligence. "Humans," Zorath said. His voice filled the chamber like thunder. "You have come to discuss your surrender." Rachel bowed her head. "Great Commander, we are confused and frightened. We do not understand what you want from us. Please, explain what will happen to our people." Zorath seemed pleased by her submission. He began talking, explaining how the Valdari ruled their empire. Conquered species provided workers for mines and factories. They built ships and weapons for the hegemony. They served their masters without question. As he spoke, Rachel asked questions. Simple questions that made her seem ignorant. How did the Valdari travel so fast? How did their weapons work? How many species served the hegemony? Each answer revealed information. Each explanation showed weakness. "Your shields are amazing," Rachel said at one point. "How do they protect such large ships?" Zorath laughed. It was a terrible sound, like rocks grinding together. "Our shields absorb energy and redirect it. Nothing can penetrate them. Nothing at all? No weapon that any species has ever created. Your primitive explosives would bounce off like rain from stone." Rachel nodded humbly, but inside she was smiling. Dr. Samuel Harris had been right. The shields absorbed energy. They were designed to stop weapons. But what about things that were not weapons? The meeting lasted for hours. Rachel and her team played their roles perfectly. They seemed scared and confused, always asking questions, always showing weakness. The Valdari grew comfortable and careless. They answered questions they should have kept secret. They showed the humans things they should have hidden. When the delegation finally returned to their shuttle, Rachel felt exhausted but triumphant. Her hidden devices had recorded everything. The layout of the flagship, the positions of critical systems, the patrol patterns of guards, the frequency of their shield generators. "Did we get enough?" asked one of her team members as the shuttle flew back toward Earth. "More than enough," Rachel said. "We got everything." Back on Earth, the data arrived like a gift from heaven. Scientists and engineers gathered around screens, studying every image, analyzing every recording. Within hours, they understood more about the Valdari than they had ever imagined possible. "Here," said Dr. Samuel Harris, pointing at a schematic his team had built. "The shield generators. They create a field that absorbs and redirects energy. But look at this frequency pattern." Nathan Gray leaned in. "What am I looking at?" "The shields have a specific resonance frequency. If we match that frequency with our weapons, we can punch through. It will not destroy the shields completely, but it will create holes. Temporary weaknesses we can exploit. What else?" Patricia Wong stepped forward. "Their command structure is completely centralized. Everything flows through the High Commander. If we take out their flagship, the rest of the fleet will be confused and disorganized. And their blind spots?" Nathan asked. "Exactly where you predicted. Their sensor coverage has gaps. We can position ships in those gaps without being detected." Nathan studied the data, his mind working through possibilities. The picture was becoming clear. The Valdari were powerful, but they were also predictable. They had been winning the same way for centuries. They did not adapt because they had never needed to. "Their engines," Nathan said suddenly. "What powers them?" Dr. Harris pulled up another schematic. A central reactor in each ship. Very efficient, very powerful. Also very vulnerable. If the reactor is damaged, the entire ship loses power. "Including shields?" "Including everything." Nathan smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had found the perfect hunting strategy. So we have shields that can be penetrated with the right frequency. We have blind spots where we can hide. We have a centralized command that will fall apart if we hit the flagship. And we have reactors that will shut down entire ships if damaged. That is correct, Dr. Harris said. But we still have a problem. Even with all this knowledge, we are massively outgunned. They have 47 ships. We have maybe a dozen vessels capable of space combat. Then we do not fight fair, Nathan said. We never have. That is not how humans win wars. He walked to a large screen and began drawing. Attack vectors. Hiding positions. Coordinated strikes. The plan was crazy, desperate, and completely unlike anything the Voldari had ever faced. We cannot destroy their fleet, Nathan explained. But we do not need to. We just need to hurt them. We need to show them that fighting us will cost more than they are willing to pay. And if that does not work? General Lane asked. Then we make them pay anyway. We make this conquest so expensive, so painful, that they think twice before ever threatening Earth again. The room was silent. Everyone understood what Nathan was suggesting. This was not a battle plan. It was a statement. A message to the universe that humanity would not go quietly into the night. When do we attack? General Lane asked. Nathan looked at the countdown timer on the wall. The 72 hours were almost over. Tomorrow, he said. We attack tomorrow. And we show these Voldari what happens when you underestimate humans.